Hello and welcome to episode 68, where we're going to look at a piece of cheap Chinese lighting equipment that's probably best avoided. I bought these last year, early part of last year, for the summer season that we do in a fairly big theatre, where we wanted some uplighters. And these were on AliExpress. They weren't very expensive. I'll put a link up for you. Usual sort of floor mount. They're quite bright. They're quite a nice punchy beam. Red, green, blue. They did a reasonable job, and I think we used them on maybe half a dozen shows, including one that was video for broadcast. And shining upwards, they were nice little beams, and they did the job. And at the end of the season, about October time, we just collected everything up, put it in a big pile at the back of the stage, and sort of forgot about it. There was no point putting them back in the store. We didn't really need them for anything else, so we just left them in the venue. And when I went in for a pre-season recce, I discovered something that I didn't want to see. I found all of them with these stickers on. Failed. At some time during the closed season for the theatre, a firm of pat testers had been in and did the inspection and tested a load of lighting gear. To be honest, they don't normally do that because lighting equipment that we use here in the UK tends to have non-standard plugs on it. So the connectors that are on the end of them tend to be 16 amp industrial connectors or 15 amp round pin fuseless connectors, which were traditional in the theatre industry until reasonably recently. But 16 amp is probably normal. We also use things like power cons and all the variations of those since they were introduced. So it's a bit of a sort of mismatch of sort of connector types. But these things had 13 amp domestic connectors on. Ordinary 13 amp plugs. But they weren't ordinary. And I must admit that I wasn't the one that plugged them up, and I didn't notice. I mean, I think I probably shoved a plug in, they lit up, and as far as I was concerned, that was it, job done, and somebody else connected them all up and they worked. But they did have 13 amp connectors, and for this particular use, rather than change the connectors out, we just used them. There weren't going to be too many shows. That was the problem. The reason that they failed was twofold, really. This is the problem. It looks like a 13 amp plug, but it's not. 13 amp plugs in the UK are fused plugs. They actually have a replaceable fuse in the housing. This is a moulded plug without a fuse, which is totally wrong. The whole purpose of 13 amp plugs is that they have an internal fuse. You can put them on ring circuits, and if an appliance goes faulty, that fuse might pop. It leaves the rest working. Now, the snag here is there's no fuse at all, but even weirder, it's even got a sleeved earth pin. Now that's a bit strange too. They also failed because if you look carefully, the black shroud that goes around the 3-core inner has also fractured. This black outer sort of plastic is really brittle, and in the cold winter it shrunk and fractured. So in actual fact it's 1/4 of an inch short, exposing the inner conductors. So that's another fail, and that presumably hadn't happened when they did the test, because I'm sure they would have spotted that too. So this particular light, which I do like, they are quite nice, is electrically speaking pretty horrible. I mean, one of the things with these plugs that is really dangerous is that when you put your fingers around it to actually be able to pull it out the socket, your fingertips can actually touch those live pins. The way our sockets are designed, the chances of that live pin being actually energized and you being able to touch it are very small, I think, because as soon as you get enough to get my thick fingers in to pull it out, that bit there is not connected anymore. But I guess, you know, if a young child with thin fingers did it, there is a vague possibility they could get a shock from this too. I'm not particularly bothered for my application about it not actually having a fuse in. I mean, for me personally, it wouldn't really have mattered because the circuits were protected by other devices. But, you know, somebody could use this somewhere else, and with this cable being a bit sort of exposed like it is, the chances of actually the fuse going is probably higher on something like that than it is on a normal product. So that's bad news. So I decided I wanted to use them again, and I didn't mind butchering them a bit, so I've spent the morning modifying them, which of course everybody does at their own risk, and any approvals that were relating to the product go out the window if you start to modify them. But I was happy that I could do it better than that. So what I've done is I've retrofitted an in and an out power con in it, mainly because we've got loads of other lights that use these white and blue power con connectors, and it means that we can share cables, and that just makes rigging a bit easier, and it does the trick now. If I grab one of these now, I can stick that in the hole, turn it on, and we have action. So I've managed to make this usable and safe. But if you're going to buy these straight from the factory, just be a little bit cautious, because you're going to get one that's got one of these dodgy 13 amp plugs on it, and the cable is going to be fragile. So for once, I'm not recommending you buy these. They actually do the trick rather nicely. I mean, they're surprisingly bright, but potentially dangerous in the way that they come. So anyway, that's a quick video on perhaps things that may be best avoided. There's lots of pros and cons on power cons. There's lots of things about buying these type of things, because clearly with this design here, not much thought has actually gone into working out if the thing is safe or not. Inside, they're not too bad. The construction's reasonable. I do notice quite a few of them when I did the thing have got loose screws, so quality control is a little bit dubious maybe, but they are a bit of a strange product, something that actually could be really good if they just thought a little bit more about the safety side of things. Anyway, episode 68. Hope you enjoyed one about lights. Don't forget, do the subscribe thing, click the bell so you get the messages when we release new videos, and I'll see you on the next one. Look after yourselves, take care.